It is so far from gentle. The only reason why we consider it gentle is because there's no striking involved. But to say that grappling is gentle is crazy. And that is a huge myth.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight as Alpra.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Matt Kwan, your host of the Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast. And remember, the Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. I'm back, and this week we're going to discuss my top 10 myths in the sport of BJJ. Before I get into it, please, I would like to remind you to like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you can, leave a comment if you can. It really helps. The more you guys interact with the show, the more the show grows. And again, I appreciate everyone's support. If you do want to support the show, check out the links in the bottom. Buy some merchandise, buy my kids' book, subscribe to my online academy. You'll find all that information in the show notes. Okay, let's get right to it. So, number 10. The number 10 myth in BJJ is that strength and size does not matter. This is something that I was always told. I think we're all told. It's one of the main selling points of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that the smaller athlete can dominate the larger athlete using technique. And so we get into this romanticized mindset about technique in the sport. And it is true, technique does come first. But the fact is that size and strength does matter. As Mark Coleman said famously, strength is a skill. And that's true. I think to have the whole size and strength doesn't matter notion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we kind of have to compare a small person who's very trained versus an untrained bigger person. In this case, I think it is a true statement. If there was to be a real life altercation, a street fight, and you would have somebody who's much bigger than a smaller opponent who is trained in BJJ, the larger untrained opponent is unlikely to win should the fight hit the floor. Of course, everyone has this puncher's chance, and just due to somebody's size and strength, generally strikes land harder. I believe that when it does get to the floor, somebody who is trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu can absolutely dominate an untrained larger opponent. But of course, now you start comparing people who are similar skill level, things start to cancel each other out because the moves that you know are no longer unknown. The other trained athlete who is bigger than you also knows these moves. And if they've trained with you a long time, then they're going to even know how you set up your moves, what your favorite moves are, where you like to take the match. And so they can start taking away things that you want to impose, right? And sometimes at the higher levels, when you want to play jiu-jitsu against really good opponents, a good strategy is to negate the things that they want, deprive them of the things that they need to get to their favorite techniques. So, everyone's got that guy in the gym who is super technical and also super big and strong. And he or she, usually he, is like an enforcer within the gym. And that's kind of the one that everyone knows is going to fuck everyone up. When they walk through that door, you're like, oh God, this is going to be a long night. I have a guy at my gym who's really, really good. And he's a black belt now. And he's kind of like one of the main guys at the gym that helps me run operations. And I remember when he came in, started training with me, he had trained elsewhere and he was a blue belt. And then just over the years, he kept plugging away and he's so technical now and he's so big. And it's frustrating because I used to be able to steal rounds from this guy. And now I basically, even though I'm his coach, I can't really do anything. He knows where my techniques are coming from. He knows what I need to defeat him and how, my best avenues of attack are. And so he's so good at shutting down those avenues and imposing his game on me. And so it becomes more and more difficult as you train with someone who you both become more and more skilled. If they heavily outsize you, it's very, very difficult to keep up with somebody like that because a large person who knows how to apply their weight, they know how to shut down a good guard. They already have huge advantages in size and strength. And now they're actually able to implement size and strength because they can cancel out your techniques. So I think a huge myth in the sport is that, hey, size and strength doesn't matter. As Professor Kyle says, technique conquers all. There is truth to this, right? Like obviously when we're training, if I could tell an athlete to improve either skill acquisition or work on their attributes, I think it's an obvious choice that when it comes to improvement, on the whole, we should be practicing skill acquisition. But absolutely, strength and size plays a factor. You go into a competition, you're going to have to play jiu-jitsu in a competition setting, which usually requires more strength, more explosiveness, more aggression. A lot of these times when there's two athletes that are around the same level, these are the factors. These attributes can be the factors that determine the winner, right? Because generally these two athletes are so close to each other, they're canceling each other out. A lot of the time it comes down to who's stronger, who's more explosive, who's got more heart, who's on more juice. These are things that actually do matter. So we can pretend all day and romanticize the sport of jiu-jitsu about, remembering Royce Gracie beating up these guys at UFC 1 who are much bigger than him. But remember that this was in a time when jiu-jitsu was so unknown and so new. Nobody knew basic strangles or attacks from the guard. And of course, if you don't know what these moves are, you're going to get caught. And then that's why over the next couple of years, we saw people now cross-training in jiu-jitsu. And it was like a prerequisite to even be in the cage. You have to have jiu-jitsu. You need to understand a little bit of jiu-jitsu. And even somebody who knows a little bit of jiu-jitsu, who's much bigger than somebody who's pretty skilled but much smaller, the bigger athlete will a lot of the time be able to negate the attacks of the smaller athlete, right? Another thing you could say is, well, does this differ between gi and no gi? I'm always contrasting gi and no gi. If you guys listen to the show, you know this, right? And for me, I think it comes down to, what kind of an athlete are you? If you are a gi athlete, you are probably going to find comfort fighting a larger opponent in the gi. If you're a no gi athlete, and I think I'm more no gi dominant in my training, I always find it easier to roll no gi with bigger athletes. I always find that in the gi, if you get caught in certain pins and certain positions, the consequences are so much worse. If your opponent can just grab you and hold you in these camping positions or in these pins, it's so much harder to escape. At least if I'm in no-gi, I can create some movement and usually slip out of different things. Whereas when you're in the gi, sometimes it's like sandpaper rubbing on itself, and it's very difficult due to the friction and the grips. It's very difficult to escape basic positions like side control, north, south, things like this. And so for me personally, I always find that size matters more when I'm fighting in the gi, because a good opponent who knows how to hold their weight down and knows how to grip and hold in the gi, it's so much more difficult for me because just because every position that I end up, every defensive cycle has deeper consequences. It's harder to escape those positions. So again, number 10 is size and strength doesn't matter. Number 9, this is another myth, and maybe the gym owners, if you're listening to this, you can talk to me in the comments here. Fundamentals classes should be easy. Or I don't know if I should say the word easy, but I do think a lot of fundamentals classes are sort of structured in an easier manner so that new people coming in off the street are able to be introduced to jiu-jitsu without being challenged too much. And really what this comes down to is, if we challenge them too much, if we make it too hard, they might leave, right? We kind of want them to acquire a certain level of skill before we introduce them to like the realities of the sport. Okay, this is going to be fucking hard. You're going to be getting cross-faced and getting your face all scratched up. You're going to take elbows and knees to the face. You're going to break fingers, all these, all the things that happen in grappling. And so a lot of the time, fundamentals classes turn into, okay, let's do 20 minutes of line drills. We're going to roll down the mats. We're going to, animal drills and things like this, calisthenics. Not that those don't have value from a training point of view. They're just not that excellent in terms of skill acquisition. So the way that I've run my fundamentals classes has changed over the years. Having a fundamentals class to me does not mean let's take it easy on these guys, let's have an easy class. Generally, my fundamentals classes are very game-based, task-focused games, just, the eco approach, but positional sparring, and then I sprinkle in different concepts and things like that. So whatever module we're working on, we'll talk about the controls, right? Usually we start with like a warm-up round from a particular position, a static position, so there's less chances of injury. And we'll say, try and control this position. No submissions, but let's say it's the back, for example. Let's try and control the back. And then you're going to notice everyone around the room is, there's a lot of different failures, of course. Everyone's losing the back. And some people can't get out at all. And then from there, you can add a couple concepts for retaining the back and escaping the back, and then you try it again. And so we get like 3 or 4 different task-focused games or positional sparring scenarios within one class, and then I sprinkle in usually 1 or maybe at maximum 2 techniques. And so it turns into a class where advanced people could show up and still get really, really good training, right? It's a lot of live stuff. And of course, I think when you run this type of a fundamentals class, you as the coach, you have to be walking around and you have to be assessing the most common problems that are coming up. Where are people making mistakes in the class with the certain scenarios? How can we give those concepts and those details that can actually make a difference, and how can we not give them so much that they won't leave without where they won't retain anything, right? It's all about retaining information, even if it is like 1 or 2 little things each class. I think it's a waste of time to be focusing a lot on like those a lot of like line drills and speed drills and things like this. I have taught fundamentals classes like this in the past, but I think nowadays we know there's nothing that really compares to like live training. And I also think that the more live training that you implement in your fundamentals classes, the more other ranks like higher color belts will want to attend your fundamentals class. And for me, I like having blues and purples and brown belts in my fundamentals class, because just having higher level students on the mats with those new average Joes off the street, they can help those newer athletes in the sport, and it gives the new guys a chance to see like, oh, there's colored belts here. Oh, this is somebody who's stuck with it for 5-6 years, right? And they can sort of see where they're going and the level of skill. They can actually see what the skills look like once they're developed. Because when you jump into jiu-jitsu, you really don't know. You don't really know what you're doing, right? You kind of have an idea of what you should be doing, but you don't really understand the little battles that actually amount to success in jiu-jitsu. So I always say fundamentals classes, I like how Greg Souders talks about the foundations classes, right? Fundamentals, it's not a beginner's class, right? Even though it is for beginners, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. That doesn't mean we're going to sugarcoat you. And I don't want to waste a bunch of time teaching a bunch of junk when really what we could be doing is just putting you in the position and getting you to work on it and getting you to work out. And again, set up certain task focused goals to actually impart those skills on the athletes. So fundamental classes for me are simple, but they are not easy, right? And that's how I think that's the best way, in my opinion, to build these foundations within jiu-jitsu. Okay. Myth number 8. And I used to do this. I used to make this mistake, and I think a lot of people still do it, but that's the myth that children learn through explicit instruction, okay? Of course, this ecological approach renaissance that's happening in jiu-jitsu right now, I'd be lying if I said that it didn't really influence how I look at teaching the sport. It's massively influenced how I teach jiu-jitsu, and with kids, it's no exception. The thing we always hear about people who talk about ecological approach, task-focused games, etc., is, oh, that style of teaching is much better suited towards higher level athletes. And while it does work well with higher level athletes, it also works for beginners and kids especially. I used to teach kids moves a lot, and it's kind of like that old Soviet quote, the government pretends to pay us and we pretend to work, right? And it's kind of the same with the kids. We pretend that the kids are paying attention and they pretend to listen, right? But it's not really happening. What's actually happening is you are showing a move, and there might be 1 out of 10 kids who picks it up. And then the other kids, as soon as we say, okay, ready, 1, 2, we clap. And then they don't even know how to break into partners, right? And then after they break into partners, they don't even know what position. They've already forgotten what you showed, right? All those little details that you showed them don't even stick. So what's the point of doing it, right? Whereas if you give them a focus, you say, okay, hold this single leg, don't let go of the single leg, and make your partner hop around on 1 foot for the 30 seconds or whatever, and don't let go. Now they know, okay, I can lose, I can win, I have a goal, and when they do lose, they're like, oh, that I now know that what I just tried didn't work. I'm going to try again, right? And one thing Greg said in our interview, one of our first interview, I believe, is he's like, as a coach, the number one thing I tell people is try again. try again, try again. And that is so true. Okay. I'm always telling the kids, just try again. Good. Try again. And putting them in those simple, basic positions, those simple goals is so much more effective because you're giving them that live training. They get that live feedback, and you're not trying to like program them with moves. Okay. When you program them with moves, a lot of time it's over their head. It's not an effective way to transfer information to kids because they have such short attention spans. Usually in a kids class, at most, I'll show one technique, maybe. I'll keep it super brief. And I try to limit I try to limit the main details, like the little finer intricacies of the technique as much as possible. And I try and talk for as little time as possible. And then usually what'll happen is as they're doing it, I'll see them do it, then I'll put them right back into a game, and then I'll watch them, see if they can make some adjustments. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'll bring them back in. Okay, guys, I saw we made this mistake. Let's adjust this. Okay, ready? Right back into game. So the majority of my kids' classes, I would say, is like 80-90% live training. Okay, and the kids love it because they're so full of energy. Even after the kids are done sparring, quite often they just want to play after. I'm like, you guys still have energy? This is fucking insane. So they're not going to get tired. You know, you just keep giving them games, keep giving them situations to work on. You're going to notice how well they improve and how quickly they can improve as opposed to showing them moves. Another thing about just showing moves, what you're doing when you're showing moves is you're like, okay, let's drill this move on someone who's non-resisting. Guys, anytime you're doing this with kids, the person who's the uke will not give a shit. They will just lie there limp noodle because they know it's not their turn. So they associate that with, well, I don't have any responsibilities in the situation. It's your turn, so I'm just going to sit here. But as we all know, if an uke responds like that, then it's literally a waste of time to drill like this. I'm not going to say don't ever drill without resistance, because I think when you introduce certain moves, yes, you do have to feel it. And there are situations where I'd want to drill versus no resistance, but that's very, very rare and minimal. Most of the time we need some kind of a reaction from an uke. We at least need the uke to hold their body with enough rigidity and with enough of a good stance that it's a good, that the Tory actually gets something out of it. They can feel what it's like when there's minimal resistance so that they can sort of work with it, right? So explicit instruction with kids, a lot of these kids just tune out. And that's the thing that we don't want. We want to keep kids engaged. The best way to do that is put them in a live situation, right? And if you on a side note, if as a coach, if you're looking around the room and people are losing interest and they're just dicking around, they're just lying down, and you feel like, okay, I can't really, I'm having issues motivating these guys, call for a water break and do it again. And just say, okay, water break. Okay, here's the next situation. We're going to now switch up the situation and put them into a live situation again. If you see that they're losing their attention, you're starting to lose the room, you got to hit that reset button and keep them engaged. That's my number one thing that I want to do as a coach during class with kids is keep them engaged. And then it's so much easier to develop skills, right? And you'll notice too, again, if you're an instructor listening to this, you'll know there's days when you come into class and the kids are awesome. They're training so good. They're not complaining. They're not talking. And then there's other days you come into kids class and man, something about the energy, they just do not want to pay attention. They don't really care as much. And those are the times we want to avoid that and really stay on top of this. And the best way we can do this is give them games to work with and put them in win or lose scenarios. And you're going to see that's when you get the best results out of them. Because really for kids, especially at like the younger ages, it's not about showing them a ton of moves. It really isn't. It's more about putting them in the most common situations that they're going to find themselves in and give them goals so that they know how to stay safe in these positions, how to overcome the position, how to get back into the offensive cycle, basic, the foundations of defenses and things like this. And then from there, we can start to build into offense. So that's my 2 cents on teaching kids. I think teaching kids moves, lining them up on the wall is a huge waste of time. And I used to teach like that. And now I don't, because I've seen the results and I've seen how that doesn't help kids actually get better at jiu-jitsu. Okay, myth number 7. And my GB friends are probably not going to like this, but this is the idea that jiu-jitsu is for everyone. Guys, this is a huge myth. This is a great marketing strategy. It is a quote from GB. I believe they use it. fight. They have a couple of slogans that they use, but one of them is jiu-jitsu is for everyone. Sounds great. Okay. And I think it's true that anyone can try jiu-jitsu. And in my opinion, because I'm such a fan of the sport, I think everyone should try jiu-jitsu. But the fact is that jiu-jitsu is not for everyone. Not everyone wants to go to a place and get strangled. Not everyone wants to have sweaty people lying on top of them. Not everyone wants to grapple. It's a falsehood to say that jiu-jitsu is for everyone. And any gym owner knows this, but we say this, I say we, it's not me. It's a lot of people who just advocate for the sport. I am one of those people, but like people from GB, jiu-jitsu is for everyone, right? Guys, jiu-jitsu is not for everyone. Not everyone needs to do it. Not everyone should do it, but those who will do it will experience the benefits and the hardships that come with the sport. For me, it's worth it to go through the injuries and the ups and the downs and, the stresses that a business person goes through in jiu-jitsu. But to say that it is for everyone, I think is fucking crazy. That's like saying kickboxing is for everyone. Like, I train a little bit of kickboxing because I want to know the skill of kickboxing, because I work with MMA fighters and I want to understand kind of like what that part of the sport of MMA is. But I do not want to spar. I do not want to go in and compete in kickboxing. I don't want to train kickboxing multiple times a week. I do it once a week. And it is fun, but like, it's fun because I'm not sparring. If I was going in there and getting kicked in the head and kicked in the legs and punched in the face, and that's not fun, like, to me. So to say that Muay Thai is for everyone or hockey is for everyone, it's crazy. No one thing is for everyone. Okay. And I think it's important that we understand that and that we're more genuine with our approach to how we spread jiu-jitsu, because I've seen so many people come in, they try jiu-jitsu and they're like, yeah, I just don't want to do it anymore. Or their kid is like, yeah, I just don't want to do this anymore. And you know what? I understand. It's fucking crazy what we're doing. We're trying to strangle each other. And then of course there's the people like you and me. If you're listening to the show, you're probably obsessed with jiu-jitsu, where you try it once and you're like, I'm hooked. Like, this is the shit. I get to go someplace and choke someone out. That's the coolest thing in the world. So for those people, it's great. But for a lot of people, it's not for everyone. So that's a huge myth in jiu-jitsu. But it is a great marketing strategy. It's a great slogan. And I do believe that even the most recreational jiu-jitsu players, there's a place in the academy for that person, right? We need those people in there because they do help pay the bills. But you're going to have a spectrum of different students under you, from competitors to, longtime grapplers to part-timers to very, very recreational people. And you have to have something for all of those different athletes at your school. And then that is kind of what I think is the best environment. I don't want an environment where it's like everyone is a killer, everyone is a competitor. Okay, it sounds great, but in practice, it's not great. It's going to be a pretty small room. You need to have places for other people to fit in. That's where a fundamentals or a foundations class is excellent. And even like ladies classes and things like this, we can debate about, should we have these classes for only one gender or whatever, or should everything be co-ed? I've been on both sides, and honestly, having a ladies class has really helped my school. It's helped me as a business. It's helped great optics for the gym. And the girl who teaches my ladies classes is fantastic. So having a place for ladies and kids and beginners to go to, so important for jiu-jitsu. But don't get it twisted. Do not think that everyone can and should do jiu-jitsu. It's just not going to happen. Okay. Myth number 6, that is that jiu-jitsu is gentle. The gentle art, as it is translated to. Guys, jiu-jitsu is so far from gentle, it's not even funny. It is not gentle. The only thing is we're not hitting each other, right? We're not kicking and punching each other, and so therefore it is considered the gentle art, right? But it's crazy to think that this sport is gentle. Anyone who watches ADCC, guys are literally clubbing each other, foot sweeping, kicking each other in the legs. I mean, this is very, very close to strikes a lot of the time. When you go and sign up for a tournament like an ADCC, you should expect to, it's submission fighting. We can debate, is jiu-jitsu a match or is it a fight? I love that debate. Any battle of two wills is a fight. in my opinion. Like, even if you're arguing with your significant other verbally, that is, in my opinion, a fight. And you know, for the married people out there, I'm pretty sure you can understand where I'm coming from when I say yes. Sometimes when you're arguing with your significant other, it is very much a fight. Things get very heated, even though you're not hitting each other. Hopefully, you're not. You're not slapping each other or scratching each other. Hopefully, you're not. It is still nonetheless a battle of two wills, right? Or a debate, for example, is you know, a battle of two wills. Even though we're not physically harming each other, it is, in my opinion, still a fight. Okay, wrestling, it's not considered a fight. It is considered a match, which it is, but it's also a battle of two wills, and it's an aggressive battle of fucking strength and speed and heart, and it's grueling. So to say that wrestling is, you know, not some kind of form of fighting, I think is crazy. You know, I saw on the Simple Man podcast, there was a guy who talked about how, well, the only thing that's a fight, in my opinion, is MMA, because it has all the different martial arts involved. And it's like, okay, but there's no weapons. So is war more of a fight than MMA? I mean, we can't not say that MMA is a fight. MMA is clearly a fight, but he was also saying that boxing is not a fight because it doesn't involve jiu-jitsu. So there is like a fallacy there, right? It's like, okay, so if jiu-jitsu is not a fight and boxing is not a fight, but you put them together, it becomes a fight. To me, that didn't make sense. You know, if you're fighting on the street and there's weapons involved, is that more of a fight than an MMA fight? Now we're getting philosophical, right? For me, I think any battle of two wills is a fight, and jiu-jitsu is far from gentle. It is even judo, you know, again, judo, the gentle way, or what is the exact translation? A gentle wind? I can't even remember what it is. Basically the same as jiu-jitsu, the gentle way, the gentle art. Judo is so far from gentle, it's not even funny. You're gripping each other, your fingers are breaking, your nails are breaking off, your fingertips are bleeding. You know, you are trying to throw someone into the ground as hard as you can. You know, high impact throws. Sometimes people are landing on their heads. Sometimes they're breaking their fucking legs because their legs are getting reaped left and right. It is so far from gentle. The only reason why we consider it gentle is because there's no striking involved. But to say that grappling is gentle is crazy. And that is a huge myth, you know. And when you sign up for jiu-jitsu, especially as a fundamentals or a beginner, I should say, that maybe there's a reason why a lot of gyms do beginners classes. They sugarcoat them, right? Oh, welcome to jiu-jitsu. Welcome. This is a beginner's class. Okay, let's do our shrimps. Let's do our bridges, right? Let's do some push-ups. Okay, guys, now we're going to talk about whatever, we show a move or whatever. But it's like, then the next class comes in, it's advanced class, and people are killing each other. It's fucking crazy. Yeah, jiu-jitsu is not gentle. And it, in my opinion, is because it is a fight. Okay, so when you sign up for jiu-jitsu, when you sign your kid up for jiu-jitsu, you are not signing them up for something that is easy or something that is gentle. Even though there's no hitting, it's going to be grueling, difficult, painful, and a struggle. Okay, this is a big one. This is the fifth myth. We're halfway there. This is the idea that time equals improvement. So a lot of people will say, yes, it's all about the time you put in on the mats. It's not really the amount of time you put in on the mats, in my opinion. It is what you put into that time. Okay. I've said it before. I'll say it again. You could train 20 years of jiu-jitsu, or you could train 1 year 20 times. If your training environment is lacking in instruction, in training partners, whatever, you are going to have a harder time improving. There will be outliers who just naturally love the sport so much and they're so hungry for the sport that they're able to just improve no matter where you put them. That's true. Okay. These people do exist, but you put that athlete in a room with like John Danaher or Greg Souders, Rob Bernacki, like some of these like really high level coaches, you put them in these rooms, you're going to see them get so good so fast. There's so many ways to teach jiu-jitsu. A lot of people teaching still in like, learn the next 24 moves, you get your blue belt. Learn the next 24 moves, you get your purple belt. But at the end of the day, does this mean that you can hang with world-class blues and purples? Not necessarily. Okay. I know a lot of guys who suck and that are overranked. Okay. And this is everywhere in jiu-jitsu because ranking is so subjective. There's no clear-cut way or criteria to give somebody their next belt. And this is just how it is for any ranked martial art, okay? A black belt in this gym and a black belt in another gym, they could be on completely different planets in terms of skills. So to say that time is the number one factor that equals skill or improvement, it can be if the time is used well and if the teething pedagogy is effective. If the pedagogy is dog shit and if the instructor really doesn't know what he's talking about, you could put so much time into training and not get where you need to go. You're not fighting the right battles. You're not addressing the correct problems, and you're not getting the right information that will actually build these skills. And that's why, for beginners out there who are new to the sport, maybe there's a jiu-jitsu community in the city that they're not familiar with, right? They're not involved in the community, and they're just typing into Google Gracie, like, jiu-jitsu Gracie. First thing comes up, Gracie bar, or first thing that comes up would be like I don't know, like a Carlson Gracie or whatever. Again, I'm not shitting on those. I'm not shitting on those organizations. I'm just saying those are likely to have high ratings. Those are the ones that are going to pop up first on Google. And so a lot of time people will either go to those gyms first, or they'll just go to the gym that is geographically closest to their home, right? So when that's happening, you'll just go to a place and assume that, hey, this is awesome. Oh, there's black belts here. There's brown belts here. Oh, these guys must be really good. But then the more you train, the more you realize you're like, oh, like that brown belt at my gym fought a brown belt at a tournament and just got absolutely mauled, and you kind of get caught in your own little bubble within your gym where you don't realize the mistakes that everyone's making as a team. You don't realize that because of the way that you're being taught jiu-jitsu, there's massive holes in everyone's game. And then you get exposed when you go out somewhere else in a tournament or an open mat somewhere else. And you're getting leg locked every 2 seconds. You're like, oh my God, there's systems I don't even know about because we're stuck in our own little environment here and we're not exposed to the outside world. So, my recommendation, if you're new to jiu-jitsu, is go shop around and make sure you check out different schools. Don't pick a school based on geographic location or prices alone. Pick a school where the instructor's legit. You talk to different people and you get their opinion. Hey, is this a good place to train? Hey, does anyone compete here? Okay, even if you don't want to be a competitor, I assume you want to learn good jiu-jitsu because you're signing up, you're putting your time and your money into something. You probably want to get something out of it, right? Like if you had the choice, paying the same cost, putting in the same amount of time, one place gets you really good and the other place gets you very mediocre, I would assume you're going to pick the place that makes you really good, right? And so even if you're not a competitor, being at a school where there are competitors, that will mean that, assuming they're successful in competition, that will mean that they still strive for a high level of jiu-jitsu because they're putting it on the line in competition, right? And so it's a good thing to train with those people because at least you're in a place where people care, right? If you're at a gym where nobody competes and it's just recreational all around, how do you know that whoever's teaching from the top down, that they have high standards? There's no reason to have high standards if you're never being tested, right? So yeah, time on the mat does not necessarily equal improvement. Make sure you outsource a good instructor, good training partners, look for certain red flags in the gym like McDojo, marketing strategies, things like that. And do your homework because you don't want to put in 20 years or put in 1 year 20 times, I should say. And that's just going to be a huge waste of time and money for you. And then one day you'll realize like, oh my God, like I've trained this sport for like a decade, 2 decades, and I just got beat by a blue belt, right? Like you don't want to have those kind of awakenings. And number 4, the myth number 4 is that gi makes you better in no gi and vice versa. So, recently I think there are people who have really proven that this is, not necessarily the case. Prime example is Gordon Ryan. He did train in the gi, of course. He has done a bunch of gi, I'm sure. But how do we know that training in the gi has a direct correlation to your improvement in no gi? Right. But on the other hand, I know someone who's an MMA fighter who says that training in the gi has helped their MMA grappling. So that's anecdotal and that's their perception. Does that necessarily mean that that has direct translation from one to the other? I think if you would ask guys from the eco group, they would say there's absolutely no correlation. If you want to get good in the gi, train in the gi. If you want to get good no gi, train no gi. I used to believe that one directly could improve the other. Now I'm not so sure, because now I see how they are really completely different sports. They require different skills. They require different attributes such as grip strength and things like this. You know, somebody who has really strong grip strength and really big hands is going to excel in the gi, whereas my hands are broken, they're busted up. I don't have the strongest hands. My grips are not strong at all. And so that, for me, that is not an advantage. But I know people who have crazy strong grips and they can totally exploit that in the gi. Whereas no gi, that's not as much of a factor. Okay. It's a different sport. I don't know that there's any actual hard evidence that could show that one makes you better in the other. I think that it's all perception of of the athlete. If an athlete says, yeah, my gi game has made my no gi game get better or whatever, how do we know that that's the true? How do we know that that's the truth when the two sports are very, very different? And even things such as framing, you frame on me in no gi. If your hands are on the inside, how can I get chest to chest? But in the gi, if you frame on me and I grab your collar and I just lean on you, I can just put tremendous pressure on you. And it's very, very difficult, even though your hands are on the inside, for you to stop my pressure. So the way that we approach the sport is different because the controls are so different. The movements are different. The techniques are different. Almost everything about it is different. So you could make an argument, oh, well, I've noticed that training in no-gi has helped me better fight for the inside position. Or, I don't know, training in the gi, training no-gi has helped me control people because it's so slippery that when I put the gi on, I feel like I can control them. Sure, maybe that's your perception. Maybe it's the truth. We actually don't know. But I would say for me, being primarily a no-gi fighter and then trying to refocus on the gi, it was incredibly difficult to be effective in the gi because I was making so many mistakes that I was fighting like I was doing no-gi. And then these guys that would do gi primarily would come in and just smoke me because I didn't really think about the intricacies of the gi, how to manipulate it, how to use it properly. And so in that case, I would say it actually hindered me, and I had to sort of relearn how to use the gi. And I don't see, honestly, a correlation between the two. If you perceive that, and if you find that one has helped you more than the other, all the power to you. But in terms of science, if you want to trust the science, I don't really think that one correlates to the other. I think that that is a myth. I think that that is being proven more and more. But then again, look at a guy like Nicholas Marigali. This is a guy who was always a gi fighter for his whole career. And then over the last couple of years, he started to really dominate the no-gi, like beating ADCC champions easily. Is that because he trains so much in the gi? Or is that because he's such a good high-level jiu-jitsu fighter and he was put into an environment with Gordon Ryan, John Danaher, Gary Tonin, all the guys down at New Wave, and he was able to just pick it up? We don't really know if it was the gi that made him better, or if it was just him being so passionate about jiu-jitsu and such an exceptional athlete, or that he was in the right environment. And so in this way, I think it's kind of a silly debate. I always see, I think it was one of the Who's Number Ones. I think it was Lucas Lepre who made a comment on Instagram, and he was like, you see guys, everyone who won their fights tonight, no-gi fights, everyone who won their no-gi fights all were gi fighters. And so therefore the gi it makes you better in no-gi or whatever. And everyone in the comments agreeing, disagreeing. And I'm just like, it's not really an argument. You know what I mean? It's not really, I don't know if there is truth to it or not. I would say that people who do gi and no-gi are more obsessed about jiu-jitsu and they really want to get good at everything. So maybe just their passion and their drive for improvement has led them to be successful in both. Maybe the gi doesn't necessarily correlate to improvement in no-gi, but who knows, right? It's a debate. It's a fun debate, but I think it's kind of silly. All right. Number 3. Here's another myth in jiu-jitsu. Leave your ego at the door. Again, this is a slogan that we have constantly in the gym. My gym, it's a slogan there too. There's a wall with like mat rules on the side, and that is one of them. But how true is that statement? Leave your ego at the door. Yes, in training, we definitely don't want to have ego in that we don't want to be afraid to get submitted, right? We shouldn't be afraid to tap in jiu-jitsu in training. That's stupid. We shouldn't get so emotional in training that we start to take things personally. Like if somebody's submitting us, or if we get taken down, we take it personally or whatever. You get submitted, even if you get hurt. If it wasn't intentional, we shouldn't take it personally, right? So that, yes, in terms of learning and interacting socially with your teammates, leaving your ego at the door is good. But to say that you shouldn't have an ego is so stupid. That is not true. In the jiu-jitsu dojo and outside of the dojo in the business world and life, you should definitely have some kind of an ego, because ego is what drives us to be better. If you're a competitor and you don't have an ego, you're going to get fucked up. When you go into a competition, you have to try and destroy the other person, and you have to believe that you can do that. And in order to believe that you can be better than someone else when you sign up for a competition, that's ego, right? If you want to accomplish anything great in life, you have to believe that you can actually accomplish it. And a lot of that comes from ego, right? So to say that, oh, you better leave your ego at the door, or a fighter shouldn't have ego or whatever, there's times when having an ego can get you in trouble. But to say to not have ego is the best way is ridiculous. All the best fighters, all the best athletes, all the best businessmen in the world, they all have huge egos, right? Anyone who's ever accomplished anything great, all the best generals, leaders, they all have an ego, and they feed that ego. But it's healthy to know when to reel the ego back. So for example, let's say I don't know anything about heel hooks, but I want to get good at heel hooks. Okay. If I go into the gym and there's, there's the, Eddie Cummings over there, just a masterful leg locker, right? He could leg lock me at any time. If I go and train with that guy and I just avoid the legs the whole time because I don't want to get caught leg entanglements, I'm not really going to get good at leg locks. And if I go in there and I'm terrified of being caught in entanglements, that's not going to be good for my development. If I feel that my ego will not allow me to tap, if I think that tapping is, below me, or my ego doesn't want me to tap, that is also going to be very bad, because it's going to put me at big risk of injury. And also I'm now, by not tapping and training, what I'm telling my training partner is, your mechanics aren't good enough to submit me. So what do you think they're going to do? They're going to keep applying mechanics as they should, and then it's a matter of time before you get injured. So in this case, having an ego can really damage your growth, and it can be dangerous in the training room. But anyone who wants to compete in jiu-jitsu or MMA or whatever in the business world, any sport, man, you better bring a shitload of ego to that. Just know when to dial it down when you need to. Another prime example, we had a couple weeks ago, we had our beer league hockey team. I'm on a beer league hockey team, and we had our finals, and we destroyed that team 8-0 in the finals, right? So it's kind of actually anticlimactic. By the time the end of the game, it was, usually in a championship game, you throw your gloves off, you go and tackle the goalie, and it's just this huge celebration. It was like 8-0, and I'm looking around the bench, I'm like, guys, do we even celebrate this? Like, this is, and it was unfortunate, honestly. Like, it wasn't what we had envisioned, because all day, man, I was so fucking pumped. Like, when you go into like a playoff hockey game, like, you have to have ego. You have to believe that you can go in there and absolutely outwork, tactically defeat the other opponent, the other team. If you don't have that belief in yourself, and you don't walk around with that ego, like, yeah, we're going to fucking destroy these guys, man, it's going to be tough for you to bring that extra heat to the championship game. And in a sport like hockey, where playoffs are notorious for being rougher, more aggressive, people are diving in front of the puck, people are fucking trying to lay each other out. It's a no-hitting league, but it does get chippy, right? Like, sometimes that extra aggression, that extra strength and heart can really be the X factor when it's deciding a series between two teams. So you have to go into those situations with an ego. Like every professional athlete has an ego. Moral of the story, ego is not a bad thing. I think for learning, it can be a bad thing. It can stifle your learning. It can be dangerous. In the training room, generally, it's better to reel your ego back. But best believe there are times when you need to have an ego, and having a good, healthy ego is critical for results. Okay. Number 2, guard pulling wouldn't work in the street. So there's this whole thing about, there's kind of like these two camps in jiu-jitsu. You can see it anytime in the comments where people are talking about how pulling guard in the street would never work. Even jiu-jitsu in the street would never work, blah, blah, blah. Guys, jiu-jitsu in the street absolutely works. Now, does that mean that jiu-jitsu will work if you're fighting like 3 guys? No, of course not. Jiu-jitsu is not going to work. You could say even other martial arts can't work when you're fighting that many guys, unless you're just knocking people out left, right, and center, which can happen for sure. But pulling guard on an untrained person in a street fight could absolutely work. Like there's so many examples where that could work, like a Tomonage, send the guy flying, pulling the guy into close guard and locking him up, and assuming he's, there's always going to be variables like where are his friends, are there weapons involved, maybe he's got a knife in his that all could happen. But then anything could happen in a street fight. Oh, the guy can gouge my eyes out, I can gouge his eyes out too. Like those are all like hypothetical things that we can't really control necessarily. So the idea of pulling guard in a street fight and taking the bottom position, man, if you have a good guard, like it could absolutely work. You could pull guard right into a sweep. You could pull guard right into a leg entanglement. You get to Ashi or X guard against an untrained opponent. Most of the time, they're just going to fucking fall over. And then you assume maybe they're intoxicated because, usually if there's an altercation in the street, it's due to some form of intoxication. Pulling guard in the street absolutely works. To say that wouldn't work is fucking crazy. Now, let's say you pull guard on someone who's trained, like an MMA fighter, let's say. Yeah, you're going to be in trouble. You pull guard on an MMA fighter, you're probably getting fucked up because they know what you know. Okay, they understand what the primary attacks from the guard are. They understand, how to avoid getting leg locked and whatever. Yeah, you're gonna have issues for sure. But an untrained opponent pulling guard, man, I'm not gonna say that I would pull guard because I like to wrestle, but the me 5 years ago would absolutely pull guard if I was in a street fight. Like, of course, what are they gonna do? When they jump into your guard, it's like an untrained person. You guys understand. Anyone who's listening to this show I'm sure trains jiu-jitsu quite a bit. You guys know that jiu-jitsu is a superpower, right? Like it is. So to take the bottom position on an untrained opponent, I think could be quite effective, right? Just a simple tripod sweep, ashigarami. If you know leg locks, you could really use that in the street. Am I saying that you should pull guard in a street fight? No, I'm not, because I think being on the bottom is bad, but I'm just saying it could absolutely work, right? Just like training in the gi could absolutely translate to fighting somebody who's wearing a jacket or a hoodie or something. You could absolutely manipulate their clothes around them to control them and strangle them. So, isn't that the reason why we're training in the gi anyways? Okay, pulling guard in the street. Shouldn't do it, but probably does work. All right, the last myth that I have here in jiu-jitsu, myth number 1, BJJ guys suck at takedowns. And this is, again, there's always those two camps on the Instagram comments like, oh, jiu-jitsu guys have to pull guard. Oh, they don't know how to do any takedowns. It is true. A lot of jiu-jitsu guys do suck at takedowns. I'm not excellent at takedowns, but I can hold my own. But that being said, are you going to compare a BJJ black belt to like a Div 1 wrestler? Because if you compare that black belt to a Div 1 wrestler, they're both specialists in their own individual sports. Yeah, the wrestler's probably going to be able to fucking take that guy down, right? Like, or a Olympic judo fighter versus a world champion black belt jiu-jitsu fighter. The judo fighter is going to throw obviously the judo fighter will throw the jiu-jitsu black belt. But here's the thing. In jiu-jitsu, there's so many different factors and variables to think about. So if I go and shoot in on you and just dive into your legs, I'm now susceptible to front headlock attacks, right? There's submission threats in jiu-jitsu that do not exist in other grappling martial arts. And so when you add those submission threats, now all of a sudden there's a level of caution that makes the takedowns look uglier. It makes it look like neither athlete wants to take as much of a risk of, and we can see in ADCC, like, yes, there are high level takedowns in jiu-jitsu. There just are, right? And we're seeing jiu-jitsu guys really focus on takedowns and wrestling and stand-up grappling for sports like ADCC, where you basically have to have those skills. Okay, IBJJF, I don't need to know any takedowns. Because of the rule set, I don't need to know any takedowns. I can just pull guard every single time. But I would argue that we are seeing more and more takedowns, even in gi and IBJJF. Like one guy I love watching, lightweight, Sam Nagai, I believe his name is. I believe he's a BJJ world champion. Sick judo. Like, you watch these guys stand with each other, it's high level shit, right? Like, the days of guys just standing there and not knowing what they're doing, I'm not going to say they're gone, but man, you get two of the right athletes with the right styles, you're going to see a crazy takedown war, even in the gi, even if it is IBJJF. It really comes down to styles and I think rule set, right? Like, the rule set will dictate how the athletes are going to behave in those scenarios. So, yes, I would say takedowns are not usually a primary focus for a gi jiu-jitsu athlete who wants to just compete in IBJJF with no judo background. Yeah, he's probably going to focus more on his guard, more on his sweeping game to get on top, and more of his passing from there. But I think it's a myth to say that jiu-jitsu guys suck at takedowns, or that let's talk about like decent high-level jiu-jitsu, that the takedowns aren't good. It's a different sport. There's different variables. Like in judo, you could say, oh, well, judo has way better takedowns. I mean, judo fighters are so good at throwing people. It's insane. But a lot of those throws land them in the bottom position. But there's no consequence of that, because in their sport, if they land in the bottom position and they land on their shoulders, they throw their opponent on their shoulders, they still won the match. So it's like, yeah, that was a great throw. Wow, that was a beautiful throw they just landed, and you won the match, but you ended up on the bottom. In jiu-jitsu, you'd be fucked, right? You'd get an advantage or whatever, and now you're on the bottom, and the other person is on top of you. So is that really a win? Does that mean that you're good at takedowns? Not really. In jiu-jitsu, it's not about, what is the most dynamic or beautiful takedown. It's what works. It's not about taking the other person down so much that it is who is on top for 3 seconds after the takedown attempt, right? And it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be conventional. It just has to work, right? Even if I pull guard and go into a double koichi and come up immediately, it's a sweep that basically functions like a takedown. So jiu-jitsu is such a, I don't want to use I've been swearing, so I'll just call it what it is. It's a whore, right? Like, it uses anything that works from any martial art. If we see something from judo or from wrestling that works, we're going to, I have to learn that, right? Like, that right away, if we see the validity in the technique, we're going to take it right away. And that's why jiu-jitsu is so special. The rule set is much more open when compared to like judo, wrestling. There's just so much to it that it really does affect the way that we approach the takedown game. And we ask ourselves, because of the rules in IBJJF, should we even dedicate time to takedowns when our opponent could just pull guard? And then all that takedown training that we did is a waste of time against this opponent, if that makes sense. So yeah, BJJ guys suck at takedowns. Watch ADCC and tell me that, right? You still see a lot of good wrestling in ADCC. Is it Div 1, NCAA wrestling? Is it Olympic wrestling? No, not at all. But it's a completely different sport, and there's different things to worry about, right? There's different factors that go into which takedowns you're going to put into your game, which takedowns you're not going to put into your game, what you have to think about, while you're attempting those takedowns and staying out of trouble, just because of the techniques that are available to jiu-jitsu fighters. All right. And that is it, guys. That is my top 10 myths in BJJ. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. Did I miss anything? What myths do you guys think about in the sport? When you think about myths in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and common misconceptions, I want to hear them. So please put them in the comments. And guys, if you want to support the show, you know how to do that. Check out in the bottom. There are links there. There are products that you can get. Check out some of this essential Jiu-Jitsu. Essential. I'm still calling it by the old name. Check out the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast online store if you want some merchandise. I really appreciate you guys' support. I appreciate you tuning in with me every week, and I hope to see you next week. All right, guys? Remember, Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu-Jitsu. Take care.